So for the second lesson on type, go ahead and go to File New. And again, just go ahead and create some sort of 8.5 by 11 file. That's fine. Just go to inches, make sure you have a good size space to work with. I'm using 240 for my resolution again. I'm just going to call this type 2. Got a white background and I'm ready to go. So on this lesson, we're going to take things a step further with type. We've already gone through the character and paragraph panels. Now, coming back to this, again, just using the same standard type tool, there's a lot this can do. We're going to take a look at how you can integrate the type tool with vector-based elements. So with vector-based elements, you know you've got quite a few choices. Let's start with the pen tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new path using the pen tool. I'm just going to click and drag to make this kind of wavy. And I'm going to make it nice and long just to sort of give us some room to play with. And this is kind of just snaking around and curving. It doesn't have to curve like mine. On yours, you can do whatever. Just give yourself lots of room there to work. And we'll go ahead and leave it there. So there's my work path. You notice it's in italics here. I can go ahead and drag it down to the new path button to make that permanent. And we'll just give this a name. We'll call it type on path. All right. Now, all I have to do to set this up is take my standard text tool, horizontal type tool, and you notice when I take it over to the workspace, here's my normal text icon. Now, this looks a little bit different maybe in Cs6 than in previous versions. It's slightly graphically different, I believe, but don't worry, once again, it'll behave the same way. When I drag this over and intersect with a vector-based element, I should get this icon. Now, yours, again, may look a little bit different than that. I believe they've enhanced this, but something like this. All right, now when you click, when you see that icon, that little dotted lines going through, click and you'll notice that it actually creates a flashing cursor on the vector-based path. So to test this out, let's go to edit, or excuse me, type, and the last option again, paste lorem ipsum for our dummy type. And now for those of you quickly who don't have Photoshop CS6, all you need to do is jump over to a web browser, or if you have an essay, it doesn't matter, just any text will do. I've just gone over to grab my web browser here, and I've just gone up to Wikipedia just for some, from some type that I can grab. It doesn't matter what it is. Find yourself a nice paragraph or two to grab, and I'll just grab this big chunk of text here and hit copy, edit copy. So do it up here so you can see what I'm doing. Now, the more line breaks you have, in other words, the more times the paragraph return hits you're going to have, the less the text will flow for you. So you want to find text that doesn't have as many line breaks in it, and there it is. Notice I've got a 14-point font set up, colored blue. If yours is different or it's too big or something, then you can change it. One thing great about this, I should point out, is that this text is editable. Even though it's on this vector-based path, I can still select it and I can still make changes to it. So if I wanted to make this a different color, if I wanted to change the font size, and so on and so forth. You can do anything to the type here that you would normally do. You can bring out your text panel and work with kerning. You can work with tracking and all the other elements that we're used to doing. So it's something that behaves pretty intuitively and it responds pretty well. It's one thing they have improved with the 64-bit versions of Photoshop like CS5 and CS6 is that the speed is better than it was in the past. If you have older versions, you may notice it's a bit sluggish as you do something like this. Maybe it's not quite as fast as you're seeing mine work, but it does work very well, and it's really enjoyable to have that kind of immediate response that you didn't used to have in Photoshop. At any rate, not only can you change the type, but you can also change, I'm just going to accept that text there, you can also change the path itself, and that's makes life real easy for when you're trying to create specific types of shapes. And I'm going to go ahead and just grab one of these handles here and just start tweaking it a little bit. Just using my direct selection tool to grab it. And you can see there's that delay that I'm used to getting. So it hasn't gone away completely, but you know, it's a little faster than it once was. But as you can see, as I move these handles and change this and make it even wavier, Photoshop takes a while to think about it. It updates it. You know, it does take a lot of computational power for this, but it does a good job. You can move, of course, the whole path, you know, with the path selection tool. One thing you can also do is you can flip the type around and you can move it. Okay, so here I'm moving the position of the type by grabbing it with the direct selection tool and just dragging. And as I go up above, you can see the type goes on this side of the line. If I go down below, it flips it so it's upside down. So there's a lot that you can do. It's a lot of control you have over this, and it's kind of fun to play with for the first time. All right, let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this path. And I'll get rid of the type out layer as well. Okay, clean slate. Let's now create a completed shape. And let's go. Let's see. Let's go and grab. We could do this with a custom shape. We could do it with a rectangle. Let's start off simple. Let's just do a rounded rectangle. We'll start off with that. I'm going to take this rounded rectangle, and remember up here your options. Again, CS6 may look a little different than your version on this part, but we have the ability to change the type of vector-based shape that you're creating. So if you don't see this little pop-up list, if you see the icons instead, just be aware that it's the same thing. You should have 3 icons up here in the left corner, and one is going to be your shape, one's going to be your path, and one's going to be for pixels. Okay, starting in that order. So the one on the left you see on the left will be for shape, the one in the middle is for path, the one on the right is for pixels. All right, just to demonstrate this real quick, I'm going to jump over to CS5, an older version of Photoshop, because I thought this might confuse people who are using older versions of Photoshop. And this is what I'm talking about here. If you look at these icons, this is what it used to look like. So you have the same choices, the same options, but they look different. So you've got shape layers, you've got the paths, and you've got the fill pixels for the pixel-based elements, the standard Photoshop layers. Just wanted to clarify that up is what the old icons look like. And over in CS6, this is what they've done. Now it's a little bit cleaner, the interface, and they've just sort of simplified it because I think they confused a lot of people with those icons over the years, and they think they decided it was better to just stick with type on that. So again, after all that, I'm just going to go with path, the middle option here, and I'm going to make a path out of this shape. So with the standard text tool, when you intersect the shape that you've created, you get that familiar line that we just saw, that squiggly dotted line that you saw before. When you go inside the shape, however, this is a closed path. Remember last time I just had the open path. I had a long line, but the last point in the path did not reconnect with the first point in the path, so it was an open path. This is a closed path because it goes first full circle, in this case a rectangle, but you get the idea. Anyway, when I see that dotted line become a circle in a closed path situation, you see it's now a circular shape. I can click, and when I do, I get that flashing icon there. I'm ready to type. Now, when you're back now I'm in a paragraph type mode. This is very similar to what you saw last lesson when I just clicked and dragged out a rectangle and started typing. So I'm in a paragraph type mode. All right. Now, that said, that means that I got to pay attention to my character and paragraph panels because they're going to come into play here. So if I have a weird number, like you notice, like I was playing around on the last lesson with my tracking a little bit, and I ended up with this strange value of minus 1,000. So if I were to type something now, it's going to start typing backwards because that negative value. So be careful. You got to make sure this is all corrected. So I'm going to take this back to 0 the way it should be. I'm going to get rid of this type that I just created. And make sure this stays at 0. There we go. And the same goes true with any values you may have played with from the last lessons. I'm going to put the leading back in on auto. I've got 18 points on my type. That's fine for 240 resolution. That should be good. And I think I'm pretty much ready to go. Maybe I'll change the color. Something a little bit easier to read. And, you know, if you want to go back and just check your justification, sometimes people like to use justification on shapes because they're trying to emphasize the shape. So if you're trying to do that, this might be a good way to go. Now, I could go back now and just do what I've been doing all along, going back and going to type, paste lorem ipsum into that. Now, I don't want to be inconsiderate to those people who don't have Cs6, so I'm going to go ahead and just show you that I've included a poem that you can use, and let's bring this over. You notice if you go inside the module 5 folder, you should see a tosleep.doc, and that's the Word file that I've included for you. If you don't have Microsoft Word on your computer, you can open this up with other text edit programs, like simple ones like TextEdit here for Macintosh. If you don't have any way of opening this file, though, you can go to the internet and just open up a web browser and just find a poem or some song lyrics or some text and just copy it. Just make sure it's a paragraph type like this with a lot of line breaks. So I'm going to go in and copy this, edit copy. Drag this aside. And I'm going to go to edit paste. Whoops, make sure I'm in Photoshop. Edit paste. All right, so there's my poem, and you can see now it's using this shape to create the alignment, to create the choices as to where to lay this text out exactly. Now, it may not showcase that much because the rectangle I made is kind of big. But let's go ahead and make a modification, then we can see that a little bit better. So I'm going to take my direct selection tool and let's just modify this path enough that we can see some changes. Let me just grab this side maybe and collapse it and bring it in. All right. So you can see now the text formatting is updated to reflect the shape. So the shape is now acting as a container, and it can be used to get an exact shape element out of something that normally is very hard to sculpt if you don't have something like this to do it. So this gives us the ability to think of type blocks more as shape elements in our design rather than just a big paragraph of words. Think of them as shape elements. Your whole life you've been writing essays, you've been doing writing exercises in your English class, but for this type of class, remember you have to think of type first and foremost as a means of visual communication. How is the type layout affecting your design? It's not just about what the type says. It's about how it interacts with your photographs, with the shapes, with the other elements on your design. So keep that in mind. All right, so the color, the shape, all this plays a role. So this is a very valuable tool in your creative exercises. And that's why I'm taking all this time to show you these features. Okay, it's not just standard shapes like rectangles that can be used, but I'm going to go ahead and trash this one. We can also use, and maybe just to clean house, I'll just get rid of the work path as well. All right, now let's try using a custom shape layer. I'm just going to come in and grab the custom shape tool, And with this, you have your menu at the top here under your tool options bar. Now, if you don't see this many different choices, maybe you see just a few, you can come over here to the upper right corner and just choose all, so it'll load in those extras. There's all kinds of different shapes that you can use in design work, but if you just want something that's fairly big and round and large and chunky, we can work with. So maybe something like this shape here would be good. You can use the snail or the bunny rabbit if you want. It's up to you. I'll just choose the heart one here because it's real simple. And if we take this shape out and just drag it out, we should be able to take, again, that text tool and just see that rounded icon, click inside. And once we are inside that, it should conform. So we'll go to Edit, Paste. So there's my poem pasted in there. This could be any group of type, though. So if I were to do this, if you have just some random type handy, go ahead and use that. Just copy and paste it in there. If you do have Photoshop CS6, you can do the paste lorem ipsum, and that will cut across all the way. But you can see the shape there and what it does. And obviously, I'm going to go ahead and just step back to that poem real quick, because sometimes you don't have elements that reach all the way across and emphasize the shape. So in other words, when the shape is turned off, you don't really see the full outline of the heart. It just kind of looks like half of it is full. You're going to need to work with the size of the font, to clarify that. If you want to select all and increase the font, not every shape is going to work perfectly for what it is you do. And also, don't forget to check your justification, make sure it justifies all the way over. Or if you force justify it like this, that's really going to emphasize the shape, but it may give you some strange spacing on the letters. But again, it just depends. You're going to have to manipulate the shape, the text a great deal to get it to work just right with this. So this will wrap up our second of these two type basic tutorials. And I would just like to encourage you to remember what you learned on these lessons and integrate them into your CD cover, into the other projects that you have, the other creative projects going forward. Just because I'm not asking you to turn in the files that you just did here that you were experimenting with these tools doesn't mean that I'm not looking to see these on your creative work. So yes, I will be looking to see if you're able to showcase these talents, these skills in your creative projects. So you may want to stick around and just practice on your own with what you learned here, experiment with what you can do before you move on to the next tutorial.